Hey there, Dr. Jill Wener here. I'm a physician, a meditation teacher, tapping instructor, an author, and an aspiring anti-racist, which requires constant self-evaluation and learning and humility and willingness to be wrong. And I am so excited to have here Dr. Maiysha Clairborne, who is so many things. And she's a physician, a practice physician, integrative medicine. She's a hypnotherapist. She is a expert in NLP, which was something we can talk a little bit about. And she's also my partner in the conscious anti-racism movement. She's a co-author in my book and also a co-contributor to the online courses and our live events that we're doing together. So it's really taken on so much momentum and excitement. And Maiysha, I'm just super glad to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Well, it's been a long time coming.
Yes.
I know we've been trying to do this for a while, and I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk a little bit about, what we're doing together and our, what our vision is, and then how I think important it is to have this sort of balanced representation in the training itself.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess for people who don't know you, I gave a little intro, but if you want to talk a little bit about your background and how, just share your whole life story, Maiysha. What got you here, and I guess specifically, yeah, let's start with that.
Well, so I'll talk a little bit about. All right, so how did I get to where I am? What a loaded question, isn't it? No, so I think I'll just talk a little bit about how I even transitioned out of medicine very quickly, and then fast forward through the rest. As you know, as you said, I'm a family doc. Integrative medicine was my specialty, and one thing I talk a lot about when I talk in my courses and my speaking is about how I experienced burnout in residency and how that led me on this sort of non-traditional path of medicine. So I've always been someone who has swam upstream, who has gone against the grain, who have said the things that people have been thinking but weren't willing to say. I've always been that person. And I think how I came to that point was through the experience of burnout and to the point of suicidality in residency. And having the realization once, I made it through that one night and that I thankfully did not throw back that bottle of pills, that my path was going to have to be different if I was going to survive and even thrive in this industry. And so that being said, it led me on this whole integrative medicine journey. And I'm grateful to have had mentors along the way that have sort of low-key guided me. Like I had a mentor that says, start your practice cash, and then people were like, you can't do that. And I was like, watch me, and then growing the practice through the recession and becoming an entrepreneur, becoming someone who loved business and marketing, and then not knowing how that would parlay into my next career.
Right.
And so fast forward, and then here I go, having acquired this training in NLP, as you mentioned, and hypnosis, and loving it so much that I have become a trainer, not knowing how that would impact my next career and even my current career as we're moving into. Started coaching in burnout and was led, and I think this is sort of how we come to know each other and even come into the same circle, is being a female physician entrepreneur and being in the same groups, right? Now, I'm moving along in life and my business just fine. And then all of this happens this year that happened, right? And I'm skipping a lot of parts because I really want to get to the part where we meet. But it's been quite a journey, learning new skills, learning to be an entrepreneur in a new kind of way, reconnecting with the physician community, because for a very long time I was isolated from the physician community. And that is because of my integrative medicine background and because growing up as a, Black female in the South doing something different, people look at you a particular kind of way. And the way that I was looked at was like, look at this granola crunchy, young looking Black girl doing this alternative medicine thing. And that was from my colleagues. And so, I isolated myself from the physician community, which is ironic because I came full circle to coach them later.
Right. Yeah.
And even coming into as a coach initially into the burnout space, people looked at me funny, because what's a coach?
Right.
Doctors coaching, except for the ones that needed it. And again, coming full circle to now teach other doctors to start their own coaching practices and to certify others in coaching. So it's just, my life has been full of full circle moments. And I think one of them is probably us coming together to meet. So we're in this, we're in the group together, and all of this stuff happened with Ahmaud Arbery being murdered, and Breonna Taylor being murdered, and George Floyd being murdered, and the first, and not like this is new. Obviously, it's not new.
That stuff actually came after we met. We met in March, and that stuff all happened in May. So
this happened after. Oh yeah, you're right. I think everything is in position to that. So it's so interesting that you say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It did happen. Okay, so let me back up then. Look. My timeline is so off during this COVID.
Oh yeah.
So now I'm in this female physician entrepreneurs group. And like I said, life is good. Now, of course, there's stuff going on with police brutality, and there's all of this with racism inside of our community and outside. And the way I approach life to be able to cope with all of this stuff is continue to impact as much as I can while I'm living. And I never saw myself, though, as an activist, as someone who is out there in the street. And, so I'm a single mom, and it's like, well, I have to be able to feed my son. And so I have to, continue to keep myself safe. And I never even thought that I had anything to really contribute or offer in this space, right? It never occurred for me like I did. So then I'm on this group, and this post shows up talking about there's this conscious anti-racism course, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And then I look at the poster, and I knew the one person that you mentioned, Dr. Ann Kennard. I know her, and I knew of you, and so I'm like, oh, 2 white women and conscious anti-racism. That's interesting. And so then, for me, it was like, let me just sit back and watch the comments. I was not saying a word.
Yeah.
But I had my thoughts, and my thoughts were like, well, how are 2 white women going to talk about being anti-racist if they have no representation? Like if they, and then of course, with my NLP background, there is this whole voice in my head that says, well, no judging, just watch, just see what the response is. And then maybe, you'll get to meet this Dr. Jill. And sure enough, I can't remember, you're going to tell me, but I can't remember who reached out to who first. But we end up in the Indian restaurant. That's what I remember.
The world shut down. Yeah. Like
right. Before, yeah.
I think we had been like trying to meet up in other ways. Like we had tried and it kept not working. And I don't remember if it was like as a result of me posting about anti-racism, or if we might have been trying to connect even before, because I had heard such wonderful things about you and your coaching. And I didn't even mention that in your intro. Like your coaching is massive and so incredible. But anyway, so we don't know. The details are fuzzy. We could probably go back to Facebook Messenger and figure it out, but there's no need.
Right. And you're right. We had been trying because, you and I kind of run in the same healing domain as well, like you
Yeah.
with the meditating and the tapping, the EFT tapping, and we were trying to connect. I think we're trying to podcast swap. That's why I said it's a long time coming.
Right.
Either way, this was sort of the catalyst for me to be like, okay, yo, we need to talk. And so, and then I didn't know you were local. That was the other thing. I don't remember you being local. So then we get to meet at this Indian restaurant, and I meet you, and instantly your energy was like, oh, okay, I know you. Like my soul knows you.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds woo for some people out there listening, but I am woo, so just get with it.
Oh my
Um, and I remember you talking about all the things that you do, but what lit you up was this conscious anti-racism thing. And I'm listening like, wow, she's really passionate about that. This is not just some kind of savior, white savior thing happening. And then that's when I asked if you thought about working with a Black person. And that's where it all began.
That's where it all began. And I remember because I was like putting this stuff out there and getting like crickets. And I was like, I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's because I'm white. I don't know if it's because people are still too uncomfortable if they don't know what I was like, I don't know, and I may never know.
Mm-hmm.
And you were like, have you ever thought about working with a Black person? And I was like, yes to the yes, like 100%. But in my, in my mind, and you know this, but I created this whole concept of the way I'm approaching anti-racism now that we're doing it together, to try to like not bother Black people and not steal their emotional energy and be like, hey, no, I'll take some of this on. Like you have other things that you are thinking about, and then like emotionally fragile white people confronting their racism. And so initially, like it was actually very intentional for it to be only white.
Mm-hmm.
But then as you're creating like enduring material, like it doesn't have to be only white. If it was just me doing events by myself or giving people free advice, that's one thing. But if it's an actual thing, then it needs to be more balanced. And I didn't know, like there just wasn't I didn't want to just be like, hi, I know you and you are Black. Will you join me? Like it just hadn't gotten to that point yet. But then when we met, it was like, yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, from my perspective and probably from some of my colleagues' perspective, who some commented and some didn't, is you can address your thoughts about anti-racism.
Yeah.
But as white people, you can't address fully being an anti-racist without the perspective of a Black person.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what it's like for us.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we began to have more conversation about and initially you asked if we could do some events together, if we could sort of work together here and there. And then I think that spiraled into, will you create for the course, and will you be a partner, and can we do some, and I was like, we should do this, we should go corporate. And then that spiraled into actually getting some corporate gigs. And I think that what has been interesting is, I said earlier, I never considered myself to be an activist. And then one day I woke up and I was like, oh, I guess in a way I am, like I get to contribute to this space in a particular kind of way. And it's been a blessing.
It's been very, like all the pieces fell into place. And I think we talked about doing stuff, and then COVID happened. Mm-hmm. We literally, we met when it was
right before.
Questionable whether we should hug. And I think we hugged anyway, but we knew we probably shouldn't have, but we did. Mm-hmm. It was that close to COVID shutting down.
That's
and
right.
Then it shut down. So we were like, okay, well, I guess we're not going to do these live things together,
right.
Once the world comes back. And then, and then maybe May, the events in May got us back going again. I don't remember exactly, but
it was when it was after George Floyd.
Yeah.
So Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, and then Breonna Taylor was murdered, and there was already like brewing uprising. But when George Floyd was murdered, I think that was the straw for everyone that broke the camel's back. And I remember texting you and saying, it's time to do it now.
Yeah.
Like we have to do it now. And I think that was the day I woke up to I guess if you could call it, the activist in me, like, no, what can I do? Oh, I know this person. Yes, right now.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been incredible. And I mean, I just, everything you've contributed on so many different levels to the curriculum, both the book, the live, and the online part, has been so like exactly what was missing. And so, and then beyond, like adding multiple levels that I didn't even dream of. So it's not like I ever envisioned this to be like a comprehensive anti-racism training, and it still isn't. Obviously, you could do 18,000 trainings, and it still won't be enough. But it's turned into so much more. And I think, you know, our both of our backgrounds in mind body work, it's just like so magical. One of the things that I love that you talk about is because the whole notion for me was helping non-BIPOC people, non-Black, non-Indigenous people of color, deal with the discomfort, the uncomfortable emotions that come along with racism, and not shut down, not hide away, not get defensive, not get angry, but like spring into action in a way that contributes to the movement rather than leeching energy away from it, which can often happen if white people haven't reconciled their demons about this. And it's an ongoing process. And so one of the things that I thought was so interesting is you shared that it's uncomfortable for you too to talk about racism. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, people think that it's easy for us, just as easy for us to address race than anything else, but it's very uncomfortable. I mean, talk about race, and then inside of the Black community, there's colorism. Inside of many people of color cultures, there's colorism. You know, in like the East Indian culture and South American culture, Afro-Brazilian and Brazilian and like the Latino culture, like all of that, there's colorism. So it's all uncomfortable because it's this whole thing of one person is better than another. And as a person in a culture who has been oppressed and who has had to hear either directly or indirectly, why are you all always pulling the race card? Then there's like an unconscious message like you should talk about it, you know, or it's not always about Black and white. It's not always about race. Or to have people say, I don't see color. And, you know, that's like, it's like a shot, you know, a stab wound, you know, it's like, what? You don't see color means you don't acknowledge culture. You don't acknowledge that, you don't appreciate that I exist in my differences. Mm-hmm. So it's not the most comfortable thing to have to bring up race, even though we know it's a lot of, you know, it's what contributes to a lot of the disparity in you know, the corporate world and hiring and employment and disparities in healthcare, disparities in you know, financial disparities, like all of these things. Race has a lot to do with it, and yet we have been so suppressed in the expression of it that and so traumatized in the expression of it. And especially like when it's almost like when we bring up race, we're gaslit. Mm-hmm. Like there's been an immense level of gaslighting when we talk about racism. And so it just unconsciously gives us the message that it's not okay. Yeah. So now to be invited to talk about it, it's not an easy thing. Yeah. We can talk about it amongst our own culture. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, do you see this? Do you see that? But it's easier to talk, even a little bit easier to talk about it on social media because again, you're once removed from the direct contact of a person, right? But when we're talking live trainings or when I did this for the course, there's a level of vulnerability that happens that we're not, that it's not occurred for us has been safe. And so for me personally, you know, I have to shut off the alarm of it's not safe to talk about race. It's not safe to put myself out there like that in order to do this work. How do you cope with that or process that, getting over those alarms, you know, like what tools do you use for yourself? And maybe they're explicit and maybe you just have developed with all the years of mind body stuff you've done, maybe it's not as, what's the word, like intentional, what technique you're using, but how do you cope with it? Couple of things. Number one, I think it has, some of it is become a little bit more natural because of my background in entrepreneurship and of course the mind body stuff. But I focus on what I'm committed to. And a lot of times for me, what I'm committed to is bigger than my own feelings about it. So that's how I've been able to be a successful entrepreneur. That's how, it's like, what am I committed to? When I think about my son and the world that he's got to live in, and I'm raising a Black boy, right? And so what's the future he's living into?
Yeah.
And so I think about what I'm committed to, and then it motivates me beyond the fear or beyond the discomfort.
That's so powerful. I love that. I'm just like writing this down. And what advice, I mean, I guess, would you give that same advice? Because some people, I mean, there's Black discomfort and there's white discomfort. And obviously not all white people are the same and not all Black people are the same, but there's these two big different categories of discomfort surrounding race.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, I mean, I'm trying to actually just like really hone in on my question, but what's the importance of discomfort in this? How can we use discomfort as a tool? And what are some people might be like, I don't know what I'm committed to, or not have those goals. Like, how do you help other people, or how can one help other people?
Well, so how, the answer to that question is different for white people than it is for Black people.
Yeah.
Right. For, I think for Black people, it really is, what are you committed to? How do you want your kids to grow up? What world do you want them to grow up?
Yeah.
We had talked about this offline, but there's this whole conversation about that some Black people have. It's not my job to teach white people how to be anti-racist. Mm-hmm. And I think to an extent that is valid, but then there's a part of that, to an extent, but then there's a part of it where if we completely shut ourselves off to giving feedback, then we're not helping the situation, because we're not giving the feedback that's needed to help you to be able to make the changes that you need to make. That's just my opinion. Mm-hmm. I don't think we owe white people anything with regard to teaching. Yeah. But I think if we look at the bigger commitment, then there can be some collaboration and some feedback given to help you all to at least see our side of it. Yeah. Right. When they're willing to. But that willingness to contribute in that way only comes when you're looking at the bigger picture. And when you maintain possibility that things can change. Although it's not going to happen overnight. It took 400 years to get here. It's going to take another probably 400 years to, for it to shift. And I can say for sure that I won't see the kind of transformation that I hope will happen in my lifetime. And I think that if our generation gives that up, but still continues to fight for it, then the transformation will happen, as long as white people continue to do their work. Now, what do I say for white people? I can only speak to white people who want to change, because there are people who don't. And those people will eventually, get old and die out. And then there'll be people, and same thing for Black people. I mean, there's some Black people who just won't change. And those of us, that generation will move on, But then for those who want to change, and for those who wake up along the way, this is what this work is for. If you are, in a position of leadership, you have a responsibility to teach others, to recruit others, to enforce anti-racism inside of your leadership role. If you are in a position of leadership as a white person, and you're really committed to this work, then I just believe you have a responsibility to continue to spread the word and give up your social capital.
Yeah.
To be able to do it.
It's like all fun and games until you actually have to give something up. And mm-hmm. I shouldn't say you, I should say we. Because I'm not talking specifically to you, but I mean, like, for white people, it's like, I believe all the things. I believe oh, not if you're going to make me pay for it, or not if you're going to, mm-hmm. oh, I might not get the same, you know, whatever it is, losing that mm-hmm. that power or that privilege, it hurts. And getting a sense of what it might actually look like to not have that, even the most well-intending white people can like freeze up when it comes to that. And I'm certainly not like excluding myself from that, because I'm still on a journey, and I always will be on a journey with this. But yeah, like, if you mean it, put your actions and your money where your mouth is, and do something about it, and don't just like give it lip service.
Yeah, and keep remembering, and white people have to keep remembering that, you know, part of the privilege is being able to turn a blind eye, is mm-hmm. being able to turn off the TV, is being able to go in your hole and think about it and you know, what's the word? Process it all, right? You have time to do that. That is the privilege.
Yeah.
Right. But there is no, we don't have that privilege, because every day we wake up with brown skin and we have to walk outside of our door. We don't have time to process that. Every time I wake up and look at my little black son, I don't have time to process. No, I have to do everything that I can to, you know, I think about all the time, how do I teach him to be in a world not fearfully, but mindfully, and stay alive.
Yeah.
You know, it's a it's a mind, you know, right. It's what it is. And then keep a positive attitude amongst all of that. Go to work, you know, and we have to be more positive than most, because the moment we look side-eye anything, then we're angry Black woman, angry Black man, and get pulled into the office and check your attitude. Meanwhile, like, their privileges, they don't know what we're experiencing.
Yeah.
You know, and for the most part, I'm going to say it, don't care. It's not like they consciously don't care, but unconsciously it's not a concern, because it's not their experience.
Yeah.
You know, it's like until your brother gets cancer is so, you know, until your mother gets cancer or your father gets cancer and is going through chemo, and you're sitting in the room with him on your birthday, right? You don't, the experience, you care about cancer, but it's like kind of far removed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I wonder when it will be enough. There is a tide. There's a shift. There is something happening. Mm-hmm. But then, you know, like, poof, RBG dies, and like, poof, all the Republicans are back in line, you know, and like, which other swing voters are going to be back in line too, because of power, you know, like, it's still about consolidating power. And when will the moral decision, which is the right thing to do and better for people, it's not just like the right thing to do, it's the better thing to do. Everyone benefits when systemic racism is abolished or dismantled. But like, it keeps coming back to that power and not wanting to let that go. And like, what does it take?
Well, I mean, this is you know, it's interesting, because I'm doing, as I'm, you know, as you know, I do this work with NLP, and I'm teaching, and I'm actually certifying people, and part of that.
Maiysha, say what NLP is. I don't think we've just defined that for people who are listening. So before you.
Okay, I'll come back to it, because I want to finish this thought. So, you know, and I'll come back and explain all about NLP. But in the work that I'm doing, I have to do this sort of continuing ed. And one of the things that I'm doing my continuing ed on is value levels, like societal value levels and value levels at the level of person. And I'm not talking about what the values are, but the level of development, the level of value development, almost like children and their social development and their neurological development and their, right? So there's a values level development. And our society over time moves through values levels. And so when we see these major shifts is when there's that whole tipping point to move into a new values level. And I think that's what we're seeing is the unrest as we may be in transition to a new values level. And it takes time. It takes time, and it takes, a majority of people beginning to shift. As I do the work, I'm watching like, okay, the medical profession is shifting. A lot of doctors are becoming more entrepreneurs, and medicine has become more entrepreneurial in general, so we may be having a values level shift inside of the medical industry. And as each industry starts to shift in the values levels, eventually we'll come to this space where, the next problem will be the next problem, but this problem will not be as much of a problem. I don't think racism will ever go away because we're humans, right? But the way it is now, I think we'll reach a tipping point.
Yeah, I hope that I hope it does not require much more than this. I hope that it continues to shift. It's just, it feels it feels overwhelming to see how far we have to go, and it's a lot. And I think what you're saying, focusing on what you're committed to, that's not what you said for white people, but it's still I think that can be helpful for white people too. If you're committed to a just society, an equitable society, focus on that, and then the other stuff that's going to be what gets you through your discomfort. I think it's
right.
Different focusing on what you're committed to, but then underlying, that's what the discomfort is worth.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're clear that it's probably going to get a little worse before it gets better, maybe a lot worse before it gets better. But we're also clear that this is a shift that's never happened before.
Yeah.
And I feel optimistic about the future. It is what it is, but I think that this is probably the biggest eye-opening shift that our nation has had. And that is why this work that we do is so powerful, because now people are really willing to look at themselves. And I've always said, racism is a conversation at the unconscious level. That's why I do the work that I do with NLP. Now, you asked me to explain NLP. NLP is Neurolinguistic programming. That's the long way to say it, Neurolinguistic programming. We call it NLP, and I will therefore continue to say that because Neurolinguistic programming is a little bit of a tongue twister.
Much too hard. Yeah.
NLP is a set of tools, a methodology, a bit of a epistemology. That is grounded in looking at change and transformation at the unconscious level, works with the unconscious mind. So the conscious mind is, I think, I am remembering, I will, like willpower, all of those things are conscious mind things. And then there's the level of the unconscious mind, which is where all of the beliefs, the values, the trauma, the repressed emotion, all of that lies. And so what we do in neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis and create your future processes, which I call timeline therapy, is we go back to the roots cause and begin to disconnect those old conversations at the unconscious level and recontextualize so that people can be free
Mm.
of those old stuck emotions and those old stuck belief systems, those old limiting decisions that they've made about themselves, others, and the world, and be free to be in the here and now and create new future. And I definitely believe that racism is an unconscious conversation that has been obviously passed down from generation to generations. We talk about epigenetics. This is like that, you know, from a neurological standpoint, is this has been passed down. But we, in order to get rid of it, we have to remove the unconscious stuff, the stuff that's under the surface. And when we begin to do that, I think we'll begin to see a real shift. And that's part of why this partnership has been very interesting, because it's awakened that I have a skill set that could actually do that. And I mean, it's not primarily what I do in my day-to-day, but it is something that I incorporate, you know, that I'm incorporating into the space of race relations and diversity and inclusion now.
Yeah, it really feels like the sky's the limit, and there's so many people talking about the healing that needs to get done, and the trauma on both sides, totally different traumas, that has led to where we're at now. And until we get in and heal from those things, it's just more of the same, because the subconscious is going to be creating reality. So yeah, it's very, very exciting, and it's so wonderful how it's very I guess the synchronicity of us coming together, and what we do, and our values, and our approach to this. So any last words on conscious anti-racism that you want people to know before we close?
I think that just to remember that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And, you know, conscious anti-racism, like the movement, is part of that marathon. And, you know, you can start with the course. And then if you're listening and you're in a position of leadership, and we come and we train boards, we train, you know, execs, we train in the C-suite, whether you're in medicine or not. But I think you have a responsibility, if you truly want to do this work, to not only do it yourself, but bring your people with you. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's really what I want to say, is just, you know, just allow yourself to be on the journey, and remember that part of your privilege is that you get to turn off the TV. Right. You get to disconnect. And if there's any motivation, let that be part of it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that. How can people find you outside of conscious anti-racism? How can people find you, follow you, get coached by you, get hypnotized by you, as I have done, which is super rad. Outside of what you offer as your client, can you talk more about how people can find you?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So in general, if you want to follow me, you can always go to drmaiysha.com. That's my hub. And that's where it'll take you to where you want to go. But if you're interested, as we've talked a little bit about NLP and hypnosis, and you're really interested in that aspect of it, especially if you're interested in learning it for yourself, like learning, being trained, I would recommend going to mindremappingacademy.com. mindremappingacademy.com. And then you can learn about the upcoming certification programs, trainings, coach trainings, as well as personal breakthrough sessions if you are interested in doing the deep personal work with yourself as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And you're on the social medias also?
All the social medias are / Dr. Maiysha. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter.
That's nice.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say I'm the most active on all of them, but they're all Dr. Maiysha. If you want to find me, I'm probably the most active on Facebook and Instagram at this point, and LinkedIn too.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Maiysha. Thank you for being who you are, and for joining me and trusting me for you know, meeting with me for Indian food that March Day. We even made plans for a future lunch, which is
Oh, we did, which we had to cancel.
Which we had to cancel. But yeah, thank you for everything that you bring to the world and that you bring to our conscious anti-racism movement and to my life personally as my friend and colleague, and for focusing on what you're committed to and doing the work that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for, you know, just being open to all of the conversations that we've had, and for inviting me into the space and giving me, you know, a something new to that I learned about myself, you know, like a new view of myself, of who I am, and for your commitment to the conscious anti-racism movement, because clearly it is a passion for you, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
Heart. So many hearts for anyone who's listening. I'm holding up a heart. Maiysha is now holding up a heart. So much love here. You're the best. Thank you again.
All right.